If you've watched any of my videos before, you know that this one particular video has been something I've been wanting to talk about for a really long time now. I love to talk about any kind of super underrated thing in Limbus company and how viable and usable they actually are. Because for me there's something inherently fun about putting a spotlight on the underdog. In fact, suffice to say, most people find it fun to root for an underdog. But if you've read the title of this video, you know I'm going to be doing anything but rooting for my favorite faction of all time. And in fact, I'm going to be curb stomping the Shi Association throughout the entire runtime of this gosh darn video. Because you know, something is wrong with the Shi Association when I can sit back, relax and comfortably delay this video for nearly 11 months and Project Moon will still not have released an identity for this godforsaken faction. I swear to the Lord up above if Kim Ji-hoon still hasn't made any identities by the time this video is actually finished, however long that is gonna take, I will make the Shi Association myself in real life and put a hit on him. In Minecraft. Speaking of Minecraft, which is to say that this isn't at all related to Minecraft, the Shi Association is something I hold very dear to my heart. I think their gimmick is fun, I absolutely love their aesthetic, I like the way they play, I love that Shi Donkyo can casually get up to 30 speed if you let her, but what I don't love is how Project Moon hasn't given this faction any attention since the launch of the game. 2.5 years and this stupid faction still hasn't received anything, and that is precisely the reason why this video exists. Because personally, I think it's time for Kim Ji-hoon to grow a darn spine already and show love for one of his very own favorite factions. Or at the very least his favorite character in Library of Fuda, which is Yujin. And why is it that Project Moon will constantly shaft this one faction repeatedly and just not give them anything? Why is that? And why is that the Shi Association barely even functions in game? Why is it that they're designed so counterintuitively to the way the game is designed? Why are all of them power crept and serve no purpose anymore? Well, I implore you to join me today as we are gonna go on an unnecessarily long, derivative and schizophrenic rant on the Shi Association as we explore how we even got to this state in the first place. To understand why the Shi Association holds so much importance to not only me, not only the director of the game himself, but also the community at large, we must first understand why the Shi Association is important. I guarantee that if you've ever been on the Project Moon community Discord, or the Limbus company subreddit, that you would have likely come across these types of polls asking which faction players want to see more content for, and 9 times out of 10, one of the highest results on these polls will be the Shi Association. And a lot of this sentiment comes obviously from people who have also noticed that this group hasn't gotten any content since the launch of the game, but also a big part of this comes from people who have been with the game since Library of Fuda. Yes, for the literal 15-year-olds among us who have gotten into Project Moon through Limbus company, this topic goes all the way back to Library of Fuda. I know, ancient times, 2021, God forbid. But feel free to skip to this timestamp if you don't want me talking about the history of the Shi Association. Because I know that some of you will have such bad Limbus company brain rot that you can't even stand the idea of getting into their other games. And God forbid we ever talk about even touching Lobotomy Corp with a 10-foot pole. Or you know, skip to that timestamp if you simply want to avoid spoilers, that's fine too. Anyway, the Shi Association was first introduced in LOR near the end of the game. They are a faction that deals in anything and everything about killing and putting hits on people. Just like that one time in Canto 4 of Limbus company where they sliced Ren like you'd slice a piece of cake. And in LOR they are also do exactly that, as the Section 2 squad of the Southern Shi Association branch gets a request to go to the library and collect my books from Thelma, the Section 1 director who is being manipulated by the Blue Reverberation to mindlessly feed more guests into the library. And at the time the Shi Association has been suffering from really bad corruption and manpower issues. Section 2 has had such tremendous losses from the insane amounts of requests they've gotten, and Section 3 doesn't even exist anymore, because everyone in it died, causing Eugene, Valentin and Tenma to go from one request to another, barely holding on and still injured from the previous battles when entering the library. And heck, all the cards that the Shi Association uses reflects their injuries and desperate struggles, with a lot of them revolving around the infamous 50% health condition of the Shi Association, other than, you know, the other really infamous thing that the Shi Association is known for: inventing gambling. As stated before, this faction is surprisingly enough one of Kim Ji-hoon's favorite in the game, noting that in the artbook for the game that Yujin is his #1 favorite guest in Library of Una and that he would love to create a game about Yujin's eventual life after the library. Oh gosh, does that mean we'll get Yujin Ryoshu? No, shut up about that for a bit. We are not to that part yet where I complain about how much the community and I cope about the Shi Association. Anyway, yes, the Shi Association is held in high regard by the devs and the community at large. I wouldn't even call myself the #1 Shi Association fan, because that clearly goes to whoever is running this channel right here. That being said though, I'll happily take the #2 spot. Shout out to Bounty of Death Association leader. Me and them are like the 2 of the 13 people in this community that like the Shi Association. And also I can't even begin to comprehend how starved and deprived they must be for content. Because good lord, they have been waiting since Library of Una to get content. I've only been waiting since Limbus company. Anyway, to the people who've actually watched the brief Library of Una segment, it may be obvious that their gimmick from Library of Una got translated into Limbus company as well. For example, Ishmael's skill 3 will turn from a 2-coin skill into a 4-coin skill if her condition is fulfilled. Heathcliff will gain an additional attack rate on the skill 3 if he's below 50% health, and Dawn gets even more uncapped speed that she for some ungodly reason needed, because apparently her having 30 speed isn't enough yet. Gosh, our launch day identity is so beautiful. No, you could only have max 4 bananas, or you actually can't have more than 1 melon per counter. With Dawn, you can just get an ungodly amount of speed that isn't restricted by anything other than just how many actions she has. It's so beautiful. Like, if you've ever seen someone solo with Shi Association Dawn, you will very often see that they just permanently have like 50 speed at all times. And that is because her skill 2 is ridiculous in terms of the amount of speed it gives. It gives like 7 speed. It's astonishing. But back to the point. This gimmick is fun. The Shi Association offers one of the most unique playstyles in Limbus company if you pull off their gimmicks. Like sitting there taking all that damage to get to 50% health pays off big time when you see Heathcliff and Ishmael just suddenly locking the hell in and just doing hundreds of damage with their skill 2 and skill 3s. You know, taking all that damage and getting closer and closer to death just so you can have really strong skills is actually just like it's actually just like etching. Oh my god, do I really want to keep that in the script? I hate myself for that joke. Okay, you know what, screw it, that's going in the script. Anyway, it's like etching, guys, constantly teetering on the edge of death to pull off insane skills that frankly go really underappreciated in the community. However, that is an issue in all this. Taking damage. And it isn't just their health bar you have to go through to stop etching. You have to go through their stagger bars. And all of these enemies, for some ungodly reason that is beyond me or anyone in this community, all have 2 stagger bars above 50%. Both at 60% and 80%, meaning that it'll take ages to actually get to this point in battles. With these guys, if you want to reach that health conditional, you can literally get yourself into a position where you get staggered at the start of the turn, spend your next turn staggered, recover and stagger again immediately afterwards, spend another turn staggered, and not even be below 50% health. You are already spending possibly 4 whole turns staggered, where these 3 do literally nothing but soak up damage, and only then can you pull off their conditional. Trust me, on release this was decent. In fact, it was good. But nowadays we live in an era where conditionals are much easier to fulfill. You want Heathcliff to attack multiple people? Run Earl King. You want Ishmael to roll an insane amount of coins? Just use Captain Ishmael. The assist attack is a much better gimmick anyways. You want Dawn to be quick and consistent in clashing? Use Manager of La Mancha and Dawn instead, with her heart block that increases her speed and her skill 3 that obliterates literally anything that it touches. Power creep is a mechanic I want to touch upon way later in this video, but what I want to showcase here is that the controls that the Shi Association has is not only very weak, and you also have little incentive to even reach it, but also that the mechanics behind the entire association is, at face value, completely flawed because of how Limbus Company as a game works. To explain why the Shi Association is flawed, we have to look at the way Library of Ruina handles this faction. You see, for those who have only played Limbus Company so far, Library of Ruina's health mechanics work very differently in that game. In the game, you have not only your health, but you also have a stagger bar that represents how far away you are from getting staggered. Though there are no stagger thresholds like there are in Limbus Company. And typically, both of these bars have their own resistance values. For example, a key page can be resistant to physical blunt damage, but weak to stagger blunt damage. So you could, for example, get hit by an attack where you are physically weak to it, but resistant to the stagger damage it would deal, allowing you to very easily manipulate this mechanic to reach 50% of your health without ever getting staggered in the first place, even though most of the time the stagger bar is lower than the health bar. But that's not the only reason, because if you thought that was it, then you're very wrong. There are multiple reasons why the Shi Association in LOR is way better than the Limbus Company, and that is just how badly designed they are in the latter game. Because the way combat is handled in LOR allows the Shi Association to perform better in that game. For example, card consists of multiple different damage types and defensive dice, and you could, for example, use certain cards that would minimize the damage you would take against unfavorable damage types and dish out damage at the same time. Meanwhile, with Limbus Company, the only option you have is to mindlessly sit there and simply spam your defensive options repeatedly. This especially doesn't fucking help when Don has an evade and refuses to take damage. So in Limbus Company, the best option you have to take damage is to just sit there and do completely nothing. At all. This doesn't help when a lot of the game is revolved around doing battles quickly, for example with the EX clears that most stages have, requiring you to do it under 10 turns. This doesn't help when your Shi Association identities at worst can spend 5 whole turns doing literally nothing but just trying to get to their 50% health conditional, and they wouldn't even have any sanity to start with. Meanwhile, the way combat is designed in Library of Ruina, it is not designed to go quick at all. The battles are designed for you to outlast your opponent or for the opponent to outlast you, with light management and card management being very important, and thus also health management being very important. The reason why the Shi Association is so strong in Library of Ruina is because that 50% health conditional can act as a really strong boost for when you are on the losing side of the battle. And lastly, the Shi Association in LOR starts at 75% of their health, with the exception of Eugene who starts at 50%. Meanwhile, in Limbus Company, the only options we have to self-inflict damage is either to really specific egos that deal damage to the user in their corrosion form, or exclusively through Heathcliff skill 3 and the counter skills. And let me tell you, Shi Association Heathcliff is my favorite among all the 3 identities that we have in the game so far. But trust me when I say that he is so ridiculously flawed to the point where it's not even funny. You see, he loses health when using his skill 3 or the counter, which helps him reach the 50% health conditional. And you may think, oh that's nice, that makes his 50% health conditional easier to reach, right? Well, I'm very sorry to bring you this information, but he loses only 5 health every time he uses his counter, and 10 when using his skill 3. Now let me put this into damn perspective for you. Please imagine, if you will, you're running a level 50 Shi Association Heathcliff right now, and he has 223 health. Given that you are using exclusively skill 3, and that every 1 in 6 skills is a skill 3, and assuming that 50% of his health is 111, how many turns will it take for Heathcliff to reach that health threshold? Assume that no staggers happen for this scenario. Now I'd like for you to take this math question and comment your answers down below in the next 6 seconds. Anyway, if you were really good at math, you would have figured out that for Heathcliff to reach 50% of his health using exclusively means that he has been provided to us from the game, it would take a whopping 61 to 66 turns for him to reach that threshold, so that he could have 1 extra attack rate on the skill 3. Doesn't this just seem like the tiniest little bit unreasonable? Doesn't it just feel like you could have reached 10 coffin stacks in 1/4 of the time if you just used a Wild Hunt Heathcliff instead? Funny enough, Ishmael, Heathcliff and Don have some of the only egos in the game that can hurt the users, all of them being in their corrosion form, those being Ardor Blossom Star Ishmael, ADD Heathcliff, and Electric Screaming Don Quixote. The first 2 will use up 10% of the user's health per use, while Electric Screaming can consume up to 20% per use. So that means we have to use Ardor Blossom and ADD a total of 5 times both, and Electric Screaming 3 times. Now I could once again throw a math question at you and ask you how many ego resources this shit would cost. But I think you already know that the answer is going to be an unreasonably high number, so I'll just tell you it outright. If you want to reach their health conditional using exclusively egos, it'll cost you not only 5 turns to at least do so, and not only an insanely high amount of sanity, but also 30 rat resources, 15 lust resources, 25 gloom, 9 pride, and here's the kicker, it will cost you 43 envy resources. All this is about the equivalent of the average price of a game on the Nintendo Switch 2. Now admittedly, I have to toss a bone to some of my favorite identities in the game. Most of these ego resources are very easy to come by. Gloom will often be found alongside Lust and Rat, and Pride is often found alongside Envy. So as long as you have a team centered around the 3 horsemen of the Shi Association's sin affinities, Rat, Lust and Envy, you should do an okay job at fueling these egos in case you need to take damage but don't want to get hit by the enemy. But even still, this is just a downright horrible option to take in most cases. Only Don's option is good because it drains 20% of her health. But even then, it is still downright disgusting that you need to use it 3 times to make the worst of the Shi trio perform optimally. And let's zoom out even further, because if you want to really understand how stupidly ridiculous all of this is, not only do you need to jump to 20 different hoops, and not only could you sign up for the Olympics with how much mental gymnastics you're performing, you need to also have 3 specific egos to make some barely functional 0-0 identities work. You could easily just spend all those grades you're gonna use on those egos and the identities to just get better 0-0 identities in the first place. Like, what is wrong with you if you do all this? But admittedly, I made this exact same case in one of my voice videos about the Shi Association, so maybe I am the moron here. Anyway, if Library of Runa where the Shi Association was at its golden age, which is very ironic to say because that is when they were at their lowest in terms of the story, then in Limbus Company we see the Shi Association during the 2008 housing crisis. And now that we've looked at the past and how much the Shi Association has fallen off since then, I want to divert our focus to the present and look at the here and now. Since the start of the game, the Shi Association has received a whopping 1 whole addition to the game, which is the Resolution Ego Gift added in Seasons 4 Mirror of the Wandering Mirror Dungeon. Yes, all we have received since the start of the game is 1 ego gift. Not even an identity, an ego gift. Admittedly, however, this ego gift is really good. I hate how it's designed, but it is good because it nullifies the Shi Association's biggest weakness, their health bar. At max rank, it reduces the Shi Association identities to 50% of their health permanently for the rest of the run. And this is actually really good. Yes, surprising. I know, I never thought I'd have the capacity to say anything good in this video, but here we are. But this is an ego gift that is really nice, especially because it is a starter ego gift you can choose. And the Shi Association fans legitimately popped off in the community because it was the first and last time in 1.5 years that Kim Ji-hoon remembered they even existed. However, unfortunately, God gave it and God take it away, because realistically speaking, we could have gotten an actual identity instead of a single ego gift. Where is my Shi Otis? Where is my Eugene Ryoshu? I still haven't seen them despite how much the community copes every single time while Burgerslock comes around and we think that we might just get Eugene Ryoshu. Every single time, without fail, whenever you see the announcement of Burgerslock, you can go down into the comments below and you will see at least 1 lunatic down there commenting about the possibility of getting Eugene Ryoshu or Shi Association representation, I swear to God. However, despite me saying that we've literally had no new identities since the start of the game, that is actually a lie because we have received plenty of identities actually. Because you see, Project Moon thought it would be really funny to release what I like to call honorary Shi Association members. But honestly, I was considering naming it Shi's Honorary Association members just because it would stand for sham. Because that is exactly what these identities are. You see, for some ungodly reason, the gimmick that was supposed to be given to the Shi Association because, well, it's their whole gimmick, has instead been given to various other identities. Case study number 1, the very first honorary Shi Association member, Engort Mersault. Yeah, You will be baffled, you will be surprised even, but N-Corp Result for some ungodly reason is an undercover Shi Association spy in N-Corp, because various of his skills on top of his passive gain benefits from being below 50% health. His skill 1, which is admittedly terrible, gains 2 coin power while Result is below 50% of his health. His counter gains +2 final power up if he's below 50% health, and his passive is insanely strong because it grants him 1 fanatic, 1 attack power up, and 3 hull protection if he's below 50% health. And also, N-Corp Result is somehow better designed than an actual Shi Association identity, absurdly enough. Like, no, actually, take a moment and hear me out here. He is designed to be a tank and actually take damage for the rest of the team with aggro and the amount of protection he has. And because he is a tank, he only has 1 stagger bar at 50% health. And not only is he incentivized to take damage because he is a tank and has protection, he reduces his own stagger threshold with the help of his skill 1. So by using skill 1, you can avoid his largest drawback of getting staggered when he's at 50% health. But he also outdoes the entire Shi Association in terms of kit designs by being actually well designed. Like, am I insane? I want to really stress the fact to you that if Porting would simply added this to the Shi Association, that they will be much more functional. Because as I said before, the Shi Association is designed in such a stupid way that they need to get to 2 whole stagger bars to even build their gimmick, while this guy has an inbuilt functionality to reach those 50% health conditionals while avoiding stagger. Isn't that just really fucking ironic? And sure, power creep has especially not been kind to N-Corp Result. In fact, he is probably the #1 victim of power creep, which I want to make a video about one day, but that aside, it is almost not even funny how better he is at the Shi Association gimmicks as the very first honorary Shi Association member. Like, how is this even possible? And he's not the only honorary Shi Association member, there are many more. Some who do it worse and some who are so good at this that it's a literal crime against humanity. And ooh, I'll get to you later, just you wait. I have a lot of things to say about you specifically, but you'll be saved for the last because you're a very special case. Anyway, for some ungodly reason that I cannot even begin to describe, the entire gimmick of the Shi Association is given out like candy. And weirdly enough, a lot of random attendees have conditionals that benefit them while they're at lower HP. I'll go over the least interesting ones very quickly, but the first one to be blessed by Project Moon to be an honorary Shi Association member is Diechi Yi-sang. Yes, Diechi Yi-sang. Once again, thanks to Project Moon's impeccable and incomprehensible nature of designing random shit for this guy, for some ungodly reason he gains +1 coin power on his skill 3 if he's below 50% health. Why? I don't know, Kimchi Hoon just felt like it, I guess. Lantern Yi-sang also arguably does the get hit by attacks gimmick better than the Shi Association with the help of his very lure status effect that inflicts 1 rupture to the enemy that hits Yi-sang. And oh boy, one additional rupture if Yi-sang is below 50% health. At least you get something when you intentionally take damage, unlike someone else. But not only that, his skill 3 does extra damage depending on how low his HP is. So there's that. LCE Faust not only also has a conditional to gain coin power on his skill 3, but also does the whole taking damage thing better by just dousing herself in gasoline all the time. Also, her enhanced skill 3 gains 1 extra attack rate for every 20% of missing health she has. So she also just outdoes Heathcliff's entire gimmick even if she dies doing so. And we have another Eagle Gear identity doing the same thing in the form of Lantern Don Quixote, getting to reuse the last coin of her skill 3 an additional time if she's below 50% health. And since we're on the topic of Don Quixote, shout out to these 3 identities literally doing the haste mechanics that Shi Association Don Quixote has, but better. And shout out to Macho Lamachla and Don Quixote, who not only does her entire gimmick better in the form of a single passive, but can also make just about anyone in the goddamn game an honorary Shi Association member. Oh my god, I'm gonna be here all fucking day long. Next, W Corp Ryoshu for being able to just blow off her skill 3 without getting 50% charge by sacrificing her HP. Blade Lineage Mentor Mersault for dealing extra damage the lower his HP is on the skill 3 and to claim their bones. Multicrack Heathcliff for doing the same thing W Corp Ryoshu does but for her skill 2. Kurokubo Heathcliff 2 for doing the whole free attack thingy better anytime anyone takes damage, and also doing rules to the back shots if that ally happens to be below 25% health. Base Ishmael's passive, why the fuck not, I guess. Maurice Gregor getting extra bleed on the skill 1 if he's below 50% health and dealing more damage for missing HP on the skill 3. And then second to last one, Middle Sinclair. Okay, Middle Sinclair is a little bit of a weird one, because instead of just copying the Shi Association mechanics, he instead has synergy with them. You know, I was talking with Kashkajuk about Middle Sinclair the day he came out, and he made me realize something. Middle Sinclair works stupidly well with the Shi Association because of its Vendetta mark mechanic. Every time anyone on the team that isn't himself takes damage, the attacker receives 2 Vendetta marks, which Sinclair can make use of to deal extra damage and fulfill his conditionals. And other middle members can make use of it to deal extra damage. And this mechanic actually works very well with identities that want to take damage like the Shi Association. Not only that, but Middle Sinclair relies on forming resonances for some of his mechanics. And out of all the factions that are the middle, the Shi Association works wonders with this. Because not only do all of them have the same 3 affinities and can make resonance super easily, they also have envy much like the middle does. So that is a thing, I guess. And now we have by far the most egregious example of an honorary Shi Association member, Pequod Harpooner Heathcliff. If you thought I was pissed off before, then my anger is about to reach a whole new level. Let me just say that if you've seen videos from other Project Moon YouTubers, you know that nearly every single one of them has their own pet peeve identity that angers them in some sort of capacity. Some have their slosh bells, others have the barber Odyssey that they hate. I, however, have Pequod Heathcliff that I hate. And when I say hate, I don't mean that I just dislike him. No, I hate him with every single fiber of my goddamn being. Every single ion in my body is dedicating to hating him every single waking moment I am in life. And every single waking moment that I look at this identity, he is a reminder of what the Shi Association could have been. This stupid piece of shit is the very source of my anger, and probably the source of all evil in the world. I hate everything that he represents, because he isn't even representing the Shi Association, but just something else entirely. Remember what I said about power creep earlier? I don't actually care that much about the whole power creep debate. However, the one exception I will make is this identity. This identity should not exist, because its very existence invalidates almost every single reason to ever run Shi Association Heathcliff. I want to eventually have the discussion surrounding power creep be its very own video, because it is a very fascinating topic and is a lot more nuanced than numbers increasing over time. But I'll keep it very brief and relevant. Power creep is the idea that units in live service games, typically gachas, get stronger over time. This exists purely to incentivize players to buy the newest and latest shiny pixels to collect in their virtual PNG collecting games. And for Limbus Company, it exists because of that, but also PM has openly stated that identities just get stronger as Limbus Company as a faction in the world itself grows stronger. Now with power creep, a lot of different things can happen and it comes in many different forms. And people who say that power creep is all about ooga booga number get bigger, miss a lot of the nuance surrounding what it actually defines. For example, I want to coin the term function creep. Now what do I mean with this exactly? Well, function creep is the idea that the function of an identity or ego will get nullified by the existence of better and more powerful options. And Project Moon handles this surprisingly well actually. The best example I can give of Project Moon handling function creep respectfully is with Spicebush and Solar Lament Hisang. While both of them are singular identities and both of them are really good in their own respective right, both of them actually serve their own unique purpose. I think this really should be talked about more in the community and should be discussed, but Project Moon did a really good job making sure that Solar Lament Hisang did not outdate Spicebush Hisang in terms of its purpose. They are both single identities, yes, but Solar Lament Hisang is really good at doing a lot of high single target damage that is sometimes inconsistent because of his fluctuating sanity. He is also slightly focused on support with his unique status effect that he applies to enemies, healing the sanity of allies who hit the enemy. He inflicts a lot of sinking count and his butterflies turn into sinking potency, and on top of that he is considered an ammo identity and as such benefits from anything that will benefit ammunition type identities as well. This is juxtapositioned by Spicebush Hisang having Tremor however, and being able to benefit from things that would usually benefit Tremor, especially from things that buff self-Tremor gain like Christmas Nightmare Ishmael and Motor Otis. And where Spicebush Hisang doesn't have high single target damage output like Solar Lament has, he instead has his skill 2, which can hit multiple enemies if he has enough Tremor on himself. And while he isn't good at supporting his team and inflicting that much sinking, he is instead really good at taking advantage of sinking that is already there. And that is where Spicebush Hisang's skill 3 comes in. You see, Spicebush Hisang was outrageously infamous in the community when he released, and still is honestly, for the fact that he has Sinking Deluge, and his funny little status effect is what makes a skill that would otherwise deal 100 damage do this. Now, I don't think Solo Blend Yisang can under any circumstance ever truly replace Spice Bush. And I'd like to imagine a lot of you in the audience would agree with me on this assessment, no matter what argument one would make in favor of Solo Blend, or whatever kind of scenario they're both in, or if Solo Blend Yisang literally had a line of text saying, "All combat start, spawn a cute fanboy boyfriend," there's nothing under the sun that can make Solo Blend, or any identity for that matter, ever replace Spice Bush's ability to literally nuke some poor soul out of existence with 20,000 gloom damage. This is genuinely amazing identity design, and once again, this is a topic I want to make a video on at some point, as in my grocery list of things I want to make videos on isn't already big enough as is. But that aside, looking at how astonishingly beautiful these two identities are designed and how much they juxtapose each other, and how despite both of them using the same status archetype, that they're both used for two entirely different purposes, and how great this could be for the health of both identities and the enjoyment of players who like one identity over the other without having to feel bad that their favorite identity got power crept, I will now present you the one identity that does literally none of that and is a disgrace to God's green earth. The one identity I've been alluding to for a few minutes now, and I've made this incredibly long-winded example just to show you how horribly Project Moon designed this identity. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say give a warm welcome to the following identity, but honestly I don't think they deserve it, so instead give a disappointed sigh to Peacock Heathcliff. Now, way back in ancient times, like 15 minutes ago, I gave you an example of how Wild Hunt Heathcliff function creeps Shi Association Heathcliff's attack weight on skill 3 with how easily he himself pulls off the attack weight gimmick. However, I'm not angry at that. Who I'm really angry at is Peacock Heathcliff. This horrible disgrace is so abhorrent in my eyes that I can't even begin to describe him. And let me make it really clear right now, he is a good identity. God forbid you ever hear me calling him bad. He has good damage, is amazing for every resonance teams, and is one of the very few bleed boys identities that we have. However, what I am upset with is that his mere existence as an identity completely invalidates Shi Association Heathcliff, and it all has to do with this teeny tiny little cute passive over here. Deal 1% more damage for every 1% of missing HP. This one goddamn passive literally does everything that the Shi Association is trying to do, but 20 times better in the span of a singular sentence. It is literally a single sentence, and it single-handedly outdoes the Shi Association's main gimmick. And I don't think just a small rat can even begin to describe my hatred of this passive and how much better it is than the Shi Association's entire gimmick. So let me put this into perspective for you. This passive is better than the 50% health gimmick of the Shi Association in multiple ways. First off, it allows Peacock Heathcliff to not have to rely entirely on being halfway in his goddamn grave for him to start gaining benefits. It doesn't restrict him to specifically have his HP be below a certain number. Instead, he could, for example, just gain benefits immediately even if he was like at 95% health or something. If he is at 95% health and is, you know, missing 5% of his health, that is just free 5% damage right there, and you aren't even staggered yet. Like hell, he could do 10% extra damage, 15% extra damage, 25%, 35%, 45% extra damage. Peacock Heathcliff already gains so many benefits while not even being staggered yet. While if, for example, Shi Association Heathcliff was at 45% stagger, he would receive nothing but 2 staggers, because they have 2 stagger thresholds at 80% and 60%, while this guy only has a singular one at 80%. But oh no, you see, it's a classic tank identity design of only getting 1 stagger threshold. Of course it makes sense for him to only have 1 stagger threshold. Okay, then why couldn't the Shi Association get an exception to, because taking damage is literally their unique fucking gimmick? Like sure, it could be the classic case of launch identity design, and to be fair, yes, the Shi Association are goddamn launch identities with how counterintuitively they are designed. But it is outrageous to me that they would release an identity that is this much better at the Shi Association's main gimmick without ever having to reach 50% of his health in the first place. In fact, let's make a case for both identities being at 50% health. Peacock Heathcliff now does 50% extra damage, and while Peacock Heathcliff can roll 11 with a 2-coin skill with 50% extra damage on both coins, Shi Association Heathcliff can now, after he has been staggered twice over, have 2 extra vital power on a singular 10 rolling coin. Okay, but maybe it gets better for the Shi Association on the second skill. Okay, while Peacock Heathcliff could roll up to a 16 with 3 coins at all deal 50% extra damage, Shi Association gets, oh boy, yet another 2 final power up on a skill with a single coin. But oh, it rolls 15 this time. Ooh, it could roll 17. All you need is just to have half of your limbs fucking amputated. It's so worth it. Okay. But what about the skill tree in the counter? Okay, to be fair, I will concede that Shi Association Heathcliff does gain attack weight on his 90 rolling 2-coin skill, which just straight up doubles his damage and is really good. However, because Heathcliff can practically do up to the same amount of damage as he can with his 4 whole coins that can roll up to 24. And lastly, we have the counters. Peacock actually has a really strong counter, surprisingly enough, and at 50% health, he has a 13 rolling 2-coin counter that deals 50% extra damage that could potentially have 14 more defense level up due to him having a natural +5 defense for some ungodly reason, and up to 10 more depending on the poise he has. Heathcliff instead has a +1 defense level and gains literally no benefits at all from being at 50% health with this skill. Yup, it's literally useless to be at low HP when using the skill. But ooh, what about the passive that actually works really well for this counter and basically makes the counter deal 10% extra damage? All you need is just 3 rat resonance for some abominable reason. After the explaining I've done of how better 50% extra damage is, do you really think I need to explain how downright terrible this passive is? Like, do I really need to explain how fucking useless this passive is compared to the ungodly amount of damage that Peacock Heathcliff could do with his? Like, it's resonance too. You need to go out of your way to form resonance and use a counter to deal 10% extra damage with only the counter, while the other identity could simply have, like, just 50% extra damage. Like, guys, I'm gonna be real here, this is just downright painful to look at. And I haven't even gotten to the worst point yet where I could just simply say, what if Peacock Heathcliff has only 1% of his HP remaining and just deals 99% extra damage? I'll tell you a little secret. I researched it while script writing, and I actually have never put it into perspective for myself how horrible Heathcliff's passive is compared to Peacock. And not gonna lie, now that I actually am taking a look at this, it is literally making me depressed by just writing it. And if script writing Wellvader is something sad about this, editing Wellvader is going to be miserable editing this segment. Like, I actually, like, how can such an atrocious example of power creep even exist in any video game ever? I just don't understand. What the fuck, man? And yes, as said before, Peacock Heathcliff can deal up to 99% extra damage if he so pleases by being at literally 1% HP. And that is another reason as to why he does the Shi Association gimmicks way better. Not only is he just straight up better than whatever the other kit offers with a 50% health, and not only does he necessarily need to be at 50% health for him to gain benefit, he actually continues to gain benefits even after he is beyond the 50% health conditional. Or threshold, I should say. Like, please bear in mind that in literally all of the examples I've made for the skill comparison, Peacock Heathcliff could instead be dealing 60% extra damage, 70% extra damage, 80% extra damage. You get the point. There is literally no other strawman argument I can make in favor of Shi Heathcliff to be able to outperform Peacock Heathcliff. No matter what situation and what HP value both identities are at, under almost every single circumstance he will be outperformed by the Peacock identity. The only singular positive I can give the Shi Association is that he has less max HP overall and can thus reach 50% of his health a little bit quicker than the Peacock identity. And at this point we are reaching the levels of copium I was on when making my License to Sinclair video. By the way, don't even watch that video, it's complete dog shit. Watch my Heating Ego tier list video instead. In case you are one of the few people who still don't know, I remade that entire video because of how ashamed I am at it. But anyway, I need to be real. Shi Heathcliff does have a better skill tree at 50% health, even if it has just 2 coins and a really bad roll for skill tree. It is really strong because it naturally deals 50% extra damage on both coins at the cost of 10 HP. Like, I use this identity, which yes, I've checked with my counselor if I have brain damage, but this skill can roll upwards of 200 damage all by itself sometimes, which is actually pretty wild for a really badly designed release identity. But even then, let's take a step back and put all of our rose-tinted glasses and realize that we need to be at 50% health and that we need to go to 2 goddamn stagger bars to even get there. And not only that, the skill tree is the only part where Shi Heathcliff outperforms his better counterpart, and under every single other circumstance to ever exist in the history of ever, it is better to use Shi Association Heathcliff number 2 rather than Shi Association Heathcliff number 1. He just has more coins, higher rolls, bleed, you get the point. The only reason to ever use Shi Association Association Eclipse number 1 is if you really need Lust in your team and you can't have anyone else fill that role for some reason. And to be fair, it is something that you may have to consider because it turns out that a surprising amount of Eclipse egos do use Lust. Which are these for? But then again, the same argument can be said but in reverse. And one can make the argument that since you're getting access to Pride resources, you can now use these other 3 egos instead by simply using Shi Association Eclipse number 2. And me calling these guys Shi Association Eclipse number 1 and 2 is an inside joke I had for a while with a YouTuber friend of mine. Unfortunately, he doesn't upload anymore, but literally anytime Pickled Heathcliff was mentioned, we always just joked that he simply was the second Shi Association identity because of how similar they were. And honestly, it's not even that wrong of an assessment, even though this passive is not the main reason you would ever want to run Pickled Heathcliff, because let's be real, the average player does not have the energy to actually think about maximizing the potential of a gimmick like this, where you can simply press P plus enter. But even though this gimmick isn't the main selling point of running an identity like this, the mere existence of this godforsaken passive just straight up removes any reason to run Shi Association Eclipse unless you feel quirky like me and salivate at the thought of using dog shit identities and egos. And don't for a second even begin to think that the others aren't safe from function creep. Isabel suffers more so from general power creep, but Don Quixote suffers heavily from function creep. In case you don't know what a kit is all about, skill 1 and 2 are there to give her a bunch of haste to hopefully power up her skill 3. Because the skill 3 actually gains a very high amount of final power up if she has a 10 plus speed. And admittedly, this identity is not stupidly counterintuitively designed like the other 2. It's pretty simple to be honest, and not gonna lie, being able to roll 30 on her skill 3 is really good and is able to beat most things in the game even way later into Canto 7. However, and this is just my opinion, I think she is generally just super weak. Like the only part in the kit that benefits from being on low HP is her skill 2, and the only benefit it gives is getting an extra 4 haste from her skill. This does however work well with her speed range though. Usually you'd have to rely on getting lucky with her 3 to 6 speed roll to benefit from a skill 3 getting extra power, but with getting 7 all haste from just the singular use of a skill 2 actually guarantees that she can get her conditional on her skill 3 off. However, one small issue is that 2 of her identities already do the whole gimmick of going fast to gain benefits better than her, and another identity doesn't even need to try that hard to outdo her speed and clashing power. Both of Don Quixote's sync identities are just outright better doing the gimmick that Don Quixote's whole kit is revolved around. Instead of going through the mental gymnastics of having to do a skill 2 the turn before to set up her 30 rolling skill 3, the sync identities can just straight up use any skill and gain haste from it, and proceed to benefit from the conditionals they have. And please keep in mind that Don Quixote relies on being half dead to even pull off the combo her entire kit relies on. Not that it even gives that much benefit in the first place, and I do mean that the benefit that you get from trying to maximize her kit is very little. Like, how much does 5 whole power even mean in the grand scheme of things, when both sync identities gain coin power on almost every single skill, depending on how quick they are. Now admittedly, there is something fucking hilarious you can see with the Shi identities, and that is getting infinitely high speed with her. As much as I trash talk her kit, gaining 7 whole haste from a single user of skill 2 is unironically broken in the most hilarious way possible. Like I said it before, but if you ever seen someone run a solo with this identity, you will see them reach insane amounts of speed values very easily, because this one line of text, unlike the other haste reliant identities in the game, is not capped for some reason. To give an example, on a lot more of the recent haste reliant identities, Project Moon likes to cap the amount of haste they could possibly get, so they don't roll ridiculous amounts of speeds and make the speed mechanic completely irrelevant. But Don Quixote doesn't care about that and will simply pull Mionka's strategies from Library of Runa and will stupidly high on the speed coins to the point where this might as well just say infinite. All that being said, this is literally useless. Unfortunately, despite all of that and how ridiculously funny this is, there's no reason in-game to actually ever roll upwards of 70 speed, unless Project Moon suddenly decides to release Haste Deluge one day that allows an identity to deal extra damage based on how much haste they have on themselves. But to actually get back to the serious arguments, unfortunately because of the way the game is designed, the whole gimmick that Dawn has going on is just completely inferior compared to actual haste reliant identities. First of all, they don't even have to get to 50% of their HP to get the conditionals off reliably. And second of all, there isn't even that much of a reason to go for higher speeds in the first place. And I don't mean that the +5 final power isn't worth it, trust me, it isn't. But what I mean is that enemies' baseline barely ever have such high speeds to warrant running Shi Association Don Quixote over any other quick identities that she has. The enemies in the Nocturnal Sweeping event are literally the only exception to what I'm about to say, but enemies are often designed to be super slow. If you want, you can go to the Limbus company wiki.gg page and look through some of the enemies in the game, but if you actually pay attention to the speed values they are assigned, you will notice that they aren't even that quick. You'll probably be surprised to know that the average speed range of an enemy happens to just be 2 to 5 speed, which is very low. Not only do both sync identities just have a higher speed range to begin with, but also there's no reason for Shi Don Quixote to even need to roll that much higher when other identities pull off the going quick to gain benefits gimmick way better than her. Especially Sync East Don Quixote does it way better than both because her benefits are dependent on her speed value and the enemy's speed value. Whereas Sync West, much like the Shi Association identity, relies on her own speed. But even then she does the gimmick better than the Shi Association by having much more reasonable conditions. And then we have Manager Don Quixote who, much like Pequot Heathcliff, accidentally just function creeps the identity. They just happen to function creep the Shi identities because of a benefit they happen to have on top of their main setting point. In Manager Don Quixote's case, it is her Heartblood status effect. For those who don't know, Manager Don relies on an exclusive status effect that is given to her under certain conditions, and she gains this from various different sources, but mostly it is from bleed damage and her skills consuming Blood Feast, which is a resource generated for every bleed damage that is taken per turn. And Heartblood is honestly really easy to build up and maintain, especially if you run Manager Don Quixote all by herself. She can gain up to 30 of this status effect, and gains various benefits from it like giving offensive defense level up. But what we're mainly concerned about is this small little detail right here. She goes faster the more Heartblood she has, and at 30 of this status effect, this basically equates to her having 3 haste on herself at all times. This makes her speed range go from a pretty alright speed range of 4 to 7, go all the way up to a 7 at minimum and a 10 at best. And a 7 already outspeeds quite literally 95% of enemies in the game. So then tell me, with this knowledge, why the hell should you run an identity that needs to put in effort and maintain the haste tag to go fast when you could just run an identity that goes fast by default? I'm sorry, I probably sound like a broken record this far into the video, but I cannot stress enough how absolutely redundant Shi Association is at this point. Not only did 2 of the 3 get function creeped, every single one of them are just power creeped by anything that released after launch day. And heck, I don't even need to go that far to make a straw man argument as for why Ishmael's function in the Shi Association is useless too. Fucking, I don't know, we can literally just say assist attack from Pequot Captain Ishmael more than compensates for the coins that she would otherwise receive from her skill 2 in the Shi Association identity. Like, why should she have extra coins when she can simply make others attack again and use their coins instead? In case it wasn't already obvious as daylight from what I have said so far, a big part of what inspired me to make this video is that we have received literally zero content for the Shi Association since the very start of the game. To reiterate, the only thing this faction has gotten since the 26th of February 2023 is a singular ego gift tied to them, which isn't even anything special considering other factions got their own ego gift tied to them and their mechanics. Like heck, now with the addition of Nocturnal Sweeping, for example, factions like the Middle have multiple ego gifts tied to them. And speaking of other factions, that is something I want to shine a light on as well. Not only is it just baseline more likely for other factions to receive content over the Shi Association, because let's be real, Project Moon has just forgotten they exist. A lot of the other factions we have had since the start of the game used to be smaller than the Shi Association. It's not just me being angry that my favorite association has gotten any content for almost 2.5 years now, it is that all the while me and others beg for Kim Ji-hoon to remember that the Shi Association exists, we keep getting content for other factions. Take for example the Swai Association, because at the start of the game, this faction literally only consisted of Swai Sinclair. Yes, not the one with the big sword, we're talking about the one that's often considered one of the worst identities in the game. But over time, the Swai Association has slowly but surely been getting more and more content, to the point where they not only have double the amount of identities that the Shi Association has, they have multiple branches of their own association you can pick from. It started off from just Swai Sinclair, then we got Swai Rodion. A little later after that we got Sawai Gregor's wife oust, and bam, look at where we are now. They received 5 whole identities since launch, while the Shi Association got nothing at all. And I want to really just take a moment to lay all this out so you can understand just how bullshit this is. So if you will, please consult the following. The 7 Association, another faction that was formerly smaller than the Shi Association, has grown from consisting of 2 members, those being 7 Isang and 7 Ryoshu, to now consisting of 5 whole members. At first it was 7 Otis, and later 7 Heathcliff and 7 Faust came along. The Liu Association at the launch of the game only consisted of the PJ brothers, with Liu Honglu later being added to become the PJ triplets. By the way, I just want to say I have absolutely no clue why they are called the brothers. You know, I like to stay active in the community, and honestly, I know a lot of the inside jokes that go about in this community, but I for the life of me can't understand why they are called the brothers. If anyone in the comment section knows the lore behind this joke, please tell me. I'm genuinely curious. Anyway, even with people complaining about how we didn't receive any burn content for near the entire year, we did actually have a fully functioning team of 6 identities with the release of Leo Ishmael, and later Leo Rodion and Leo Ryoshu. And then there are factions which weren't even there at the start of the game, yet have grown to be even larger than the Shi Association, just because they can and have actual funding. Sync Association is a notable example, at first only having Sync Stout Don, but later growing to have 5 whole identities thanks to Sync Sinclair, Sync Otis, Sync Result, and Sync Don Tube of Spicy. The Shi Association is exactly the same, starting only with the Shi Rodion, who already is a goddamn powerhouse by herself, but later getting 3 more bodies on her team with the Shi Yisang, the Shi Honglu, and the Shi Mersault. And arguably, you can even make a fucking case for the Uvi Association of all things to have more content than the Shi Association, because they actually have a 000 identity on their team, while the Shi Association consists of entirely 00 identities, for fuck's sake. And like, I'm only mentioning associations because it feels more appropriate to mention them, seeing as they are fellow associations, but you can make this case for any other faction, like the Bloodfiends faction, that consists entirely of 000s, or for example the Middle, who currently has as many identities as the Shi Association. Or heck, a lot more of a relevant and probably the most outrageous example is a new addition the Arcorp identities got, now bolstering 4 whole 000 identities much like the Bloodfiends. It is honestly kind of ridiculous to imagine that we now live in a world where teams that were so small at the launch of the game are now so much larger, while the Shi Association has gotten literally nothing. And some of these teams consist entirely of 000 identities. And most insane of all, there's actually a faction out there that is, in the most literal way possible, 10,000 times bigger than the Shi Association. And that is the amount of people who subscribe to me at the time of writing. Which speaking of, you should join as well if you're enjoying the video so far. You see, the Whale Raider Association has many great benefits, such as getting a 000 identity in your next 10 pool as a sign-up bonus. And if you feel extra dedicated to supporting the Whale Raider Association and want to help fund the channel, consider becoming a member, as it helps out a lot with making better videos in the future. Fun fact, this is like probably the last video I'm making on my current computer, because I'm actually buying a new better computer soon. And all that would not even be possible without the help from all of you. Like, stereotypical YouTuber speech aside, on a personal level, this genuinely means so much to me as someone who grew up really poor and didn't have a lot of spending power at all. It's kinda nuts to me that one of the first ever purchases I've made on my own accord is a new PC to make bigger and better videos, and it just means so much to me. Like, thank you. Even if you are here just listening to me ramble on and don't even consider becoming a channel member, I just wanted to say that really quickly. I even just enjoy you listening to me if you just have this on in the background somewhere. But with that being said, back to the original topic. I want you to see how absurd this situation is, maybe even crazy. Maybe even how crazy this situation is. This is so ridiculous to me that honestly I'm willing to bet my soul on this and have Kim Ji-hoon claim it if I end up being wrong, but the chance for us to get another Shi identity at this point is lower than the chance for Portic Moon to release goddamn Farmwatch Otis in the next year or so. This is a call out to the people who still for some ungodly reason believe we will get Farmwatch Otis, by the way, even though Canto 8 is close to releasing at the time this video will go up, if not already released. I don't care how much you cope and see to get a Farmwatch identity, you've not known the pain and suffering us Shi Association fans have went through. And speaking of coping and seeding, the Shi Association fans do a hell of a lot of it. I know I made a nudge to Farmwatch Otis fans and the people who for some reason still hold on to hope for that identity to come out, but if you were to put a Shi Association fan and a Farmwatch Otis believer in the same room and have to participate in the competition on who could cope harder, then the Shi Association fan would win no diff. Like, I swear to God, you could go onto any discussion that is even tangentially related to Walpurgisnacht, and you will always find at least someone praying on their hands and knees for Porting Moon to release Yujin, Ryoshu, or something else. Hell, I'm kind of guilty of this myself, because I've literally made this exact same joke myself multiple times over. And it's not only during Walpurgisnacht that Shi Association fans will pray on their hands and knees. Any date that has even the slightest chance of receiving Shi Association content, there will be people screaming from the top of their lungs to get content for the Shi Association on those days. Trust me, I know, because I'm the second most dedicated Shi Association fan in the community. I was there on the 4th of April 2024 when every single fan came out of the woodworks to collectively pray for Yujin Ryoshu to be announced. For example, on Yujin's canonical birthday date, you will always see someone shouting to the gods up above in the pantheons of heaven for Porting Moon to release Yujin Ryoshu. And trust me, I love the idea of Porting Moon releasing Yujin Ryoshu getting the 12th Bounty of Death in Limbus company as much as the next guy. But I am unlike the rest of the fans because I have completely lost hope in the idea of ever getting a Shi Association identity in the first place. And that is something I want to talk about next. Now that we've discussed the full intricacies of the past of the Shi Association and the disappointing present, the next natural thing to discuss is the future, and not gonna lie, the future is only goddamn bleak going off of what we've discussed so far. Now let's just immediately address the elephant in the room right now. There is a very obvious time where we could see the Shi Association getting some content. And I absolutely hate to say it because I'm literally about to feed the narrative I just bashed repeatedly, but we may see Shi Association in the 7th of Walpurgisnacht. Please hear me out for just a second. I'm not saying this because of the stereotypical, ooh, surely Porting Moon will release a Shi Association identity this Walpurgisnacht, but it is either we are getting it for the 7th one or we are literally not getting it at all. Let me explain. The 7th of Walpurgisnacht is the most likely place to ever receive Shi Association content ever because of a multitude of reasons. First of all, at the time of writing we have the 6th Walpurgisnacht coming up and it is going to be related to LobCorp. You see, Walpurgisnacht has a cycle between Library of Huda and LobCorp. If the previous Walpurgis was a LobCorp one, the next one will be an LOR one. And after that we get another LobCorp one again. And because the 5th Walpurgisnacht was one focused around the full stop office from Library of Huda, the 6th one will be about LobCorp and thus the 7th one will be about Library of Huda again. Secondly, the 7th of Walpurgisnacht is the most likely to adapt the Shi Association story out of all the possible options from the Urban Plague and Urban Nightmare receptions in the game. The Shi Association is the most logical one to adapt considering what we've already seen being set up in the 5th Walpurgisnacht. To give a very quick recap of the story of the Walpurgisnacht, in the story, Limbus Company basically takes on the roles of the full stop office during the Church of Gears mission. And just like the story in LOR, the group ends up getting confronted by the Blue Reverberation. Now, question is, why the heck would Porting Moon deliberately have the Limbus Company squad encounter Arcadia? Is he really just there to simply aura farm and have fight moments? To be fair, Porting Moon could very well do that, seeing as actual fan service is few and far between, and having the Blue Reverberation appear is really sick. But aside from that, there has to be a reason why they had him appear and vaguely hint that this won't be the last encounter with him, right? Well, if you happen to recall the story behind the Shi Association from like half an hour ago, a big part of the reason why the Shi Association actually ever ends up going to the library to begin with is because of Arcadia pressuring upper management into sending Section 2 to the library. And you see, out of all possible receptions in Urban Nightmare, Arcadia happens to only play a major role in the Shi Association storyline and shows up personally later in the Smiling Faces reception, which happens as a result of his meddling in the Shi Association reception. Don't you think it's really convenient when we've previously established that we would likely meet the Blue Reverberation again, and that the storyline in which Arcadia himself plays the biggest role in just so happens to be the Shi Association one? In my opinion, it just all lines up way too well from a narrative perspective and gives a way for an excuse for the Shi Association to actually appear, rather than them appearing by chance because people are praying on their hands and knees to Kim Ji-hoon and hoping he just drops an identity out of nowhere. But let's be real here, despite how much this makes sense and that a lot of fate is being put into Salvage Walpurgisnacht, we can also just as easily get a Walpurgisnacht based off of the goddamn Smiling Faces. Because unlike the Shi Association story, Arcadia actually physically shows up in that one. And let's be real, we would need to significantly tweak the story of how the Shi Association reception plays out if we want to get to a point where we meet Arcadia. So let's face it everyone, we'll probably just get Smiling Faces Ryoshu instead of a Yujin or something like that, and it's gonna be the most hilarious twist ever. And speaking of Ryoshu, this leads into the third point I want to make as to why the 7th of Burgensnacht is going to be the time we'll finally get Shi Association content. And that is because it's likely to drop literally around Ryoshu's Canto. Throughout the story we've gotten very small hints as to Ryoshu's former affiliations, and based on those moments, and the fact that she seems to be wearing a Shi Association jumpsuit in the depiction of her own employee card in the theater, we may end up seeing Shi Association play a very large role in the Canto, and thus we have very large chance that they'll either show up as story identities, or that it gives a way for the 7th of Burgensnacht to be all about them. But if they do appear either from Burgensnacht or from the Canto story, what can we actually expect from them? What we could expect is actually a faction leader identity gimmick to happen. As for how they are going to pull it off, I can't say, because there are various ways they can handle it, such as with a Yujin Ryoshu identity or some other identity. But typically when it comes to very old identities that have been there since the launch of the game or for a very long time, a way that Project Moon likes to make old identities relevant is with the help of a faction leader identity. Think for example Blade Lineage mentor Mersault and Kurokomo Ishmael. Both of these factions had identities that were there since the launch of the game. Think BL Yisang and Kurokumo Rodion. And a lot of them have identities that have since the launch of the game fallen really off in terms of their own individual power. Now what Project Moon likes to do a lot of the times to make older identities more relevant is to have faction leader identities that not only make them stronger but also give them a renewed purpose in the game. And I can see a similar thing happening with the Shi Association. It is very likely that if and once the floodgates open for Shi Association content, that we'll just get flooded with it. And I imagine we'll get enough to make an entire team revolved around them, along with a faction leader identity. Similarly to the Blade Lineage event, where we got 3 Blade Lineage identities all at once, with Blade Lineage Don Quixote, Blade Lineage Faust and Blade Lineage Mersault. We could see something similar happen, but for the Shi Association this time. But of course that is merely just speculation and something I'd like to say. And don't get me wrong, the reason I'm making this video is because I want to start a discussion on this, and because I love the Shi Association. It is my favourite faction in the game, and despite how abhorrently flawed they are, I really love these identities. Sure, I'm very goddamn biased, because let's be real, I'm pretty much known for my really niche opinions. Because heck, for me it's just super fun to make cases and arguments for something subpar to be considered as a valid option. But at this point, the position that the Shi Association has is so bad that I can barely even make an argument for using these identities over others. Like for example, who would ever take my opinions on Shi Heathcliff being a really good identity when we have something like Wild Hunt Heathcliff and God forbid he who shall not be named as identities. As much as I bash the Shi Association despite claiming to be the second biggest Shi Association fan out there, a lot of my critique and want for the Shi Association does come from a place of adoration and simply wanting to see these identities actually have a glow up of some kind. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, other than that we should demand content for the Shi Association, is that I don't actually hate this faction. Yes, it is mostly negative and call it rage bait all you want, but this topic has been on my mind for over a year now, and I just want to put my thoughts into a video. And honestly, this video should have been done earlier because I could just not have physically delayed this video for longer than I already have. And I wish I was joking, but there's a funny weird irony to it all. It's impeccable, almost inconceivable that I could literally delay this video for nearly an entire year and there's still no Shi identity. Please take a breather and take a step back to realize that we are probably getting Silk Song before a new Shi identity.